Hey, Xander.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing okay? How are you?
Pretty good. Very, very gray and rainy here today, but that's I think we were spoiled this year. We actually got some sun over the winter, and now that we're having a proper Seattle winter, it's like, well, I feel a little cheated again.
Yeah, I think we traded places this year. Bay Area has been very rainy. I think it's going to start again tomorrow.
Is it?
Yeah, that's what I saw in the forecast.
Ah, actually, I kind of like the rain. I say that now. Oh, you're muted.
Rain is nice once in a while, but it's just like constantly rained.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in LA, and so I was sick of eternal sun. You know, uh, I went to San Diego for a bit recently. I was like, oh, this like warm weather thing is like kind of nice. The grass is always greener, particularly if it's been raining.
Yeah. Yeah, I miss the seasons.
Coming from Minnesota, I definitely don't miss the cold and the snow at all. I do miss the concept of affordable housing, but what are you gonna do?
Well, the concept is still there with you. You can
I don't
think about
know. I
it.
feel very detached from it at this point.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. What is a house in the Midwest now?
Eh, you can do pretty well for 400. Like, nice 4 bedroom, 2,000 square foot. Yeah.
Oof. Oof. Are the energy costs like much higher because you gotta like heat that much more or anything like that? Or
I
is it
imagine so. I never owned when I lived there, just rented. But yeah, I mean, I do imagine that. Especially older houses I know cost a lot to heat.
Huh, yeah. That it's always funny to me, like when I was like moving around a lot, like out of college or whatever, and I'd like try to figure out, hey, could I afford this place? I'd like try to figure, well, what would the energy bill be? And there's just no answering that. You're just like, hopefully under this amount.
Well, I don't see any agenda items today. Um, did anyone have anything they wanted to add? Go ahead.
I mean, if people have looked at the refresh doc, the target handler refresh, we could talk about that. Or if there are no topics, we could call it a day. Either is fine with me. That app has moved forward a little bit too. Rita, if you were interested in talking about that, just brainstorming, not necessarily recommending.
Uh, yeah, I don't know. I can't edit the doc, so I pasted a link to the issue. And I wanted to just know your opinion, Max. Do we want to keep like include this in the current implementation or design, or do you want to keep it in the back pocket
Uh,
just for now and then
I
reiterate?
I mean, the most important thing is that to highlight that our design change with the multi enforcement point stuff handles this kind of situation, right? Whether it gets added as part of implementing it or whether it gets added after the fact, I don't really have a strong opinion on. maybe adding it as part of doing it is like a good, cohesion check. Make sure that we're actually doing things that work well for multi-enforcement point use cases. That would be an argument for doing it. An argument against doing it would be narrow scoped PRs. To be honest, it's probably not that much code to add it. Like the majority of the code will be the schema change. So I kind of leave it to you. Like,
Okay.
do think about how you would do it with
Yeah.
your API changes at the very least, though.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, that was the only thing. And also, Xander, I mean, whoever the owner of this meeting note doc is, can we reiterate on the permission once more? It seems I'm not even able to suggest edits as well. So
Yeah, do you want to drop your email in the chat?
yeah.
Yeah, this is a good example of like a kind of weird capability. Like we could play around with this too. I'm not saying that we want to go this far, but you could imagine specifying the exact return code, right? If a user wanted to set up some kind of system where return code 2 means this, return code 3 means that, blah, blah, blah. Maybe return code is a proxy for severity. I don't know. It might be worth having that discussion, like whether that's interesting. Like, I don't know from a user perspective whether it's interesting, but it's possible. And it's a good example of a more complex enforcement action if we do it. So from my perspective, it's interesting.
True. Sorry to hog your conversation about VIP though.
No, the doc was empty. So if we were gonna do, I was just making suggestions on things we could talk about if we didn't want to end early. I'm curious, though, did people have thoughts on the whole return code thing? Like, is
This
it
is
sufficient?
the gear return code. Sorry.
Yeah,
This is
the
gear return code.
Yeah, so JDIP linked to issue 2945, which is add a Gator test CLI option for Execode 1 in case of enforcement action warn. So that was the user ask. I would kind of flip it on its head and say an enforcement action could be return this return code, right? And then the question is, do we really, is it sufficient to just have like a binary, like return code 0, return code 1? Or do we want the possibility to have like return code 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever the user specifies?
Yeah, I was thinking if we can replicate the kubectl behavior, which I think with warn, it still returns 0, but it has like this orange message, like yellow.
Oh, but the user specifically wants a return code so they could test against it, right? So this would be like customizable. I agree, like the default behavior should mirror kubectl.
Oh, I see. Okay, gotcha. And that might be like a flag, maybe then.
So the thought was we could, on a per constraint level, make this an enforcement action. Actually, you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, customizable return codes are a bad idea. Because I mean, other than 0 and 1, because they don't coalesce. Meaning, if I have like 3 constraints all failing, one says return code 1, the other returns return code 10, the other one 15.
Yeah.
Which return code do you return? Because you can
Yeah,
only
do you combine them?
Yeah, so like 0 and 1 combined.
Yeah, that's very confusing. Yeah, I think we should only do like the one of the other. And then we can have like a flag to, hey, if it's warning, like to return 0, like if like fail on warn or something like that.
Oh, I would still put it in the constraint as an enforcement action, because that lets users customize it per constraint. Like, hey, this is a warning, but I still want CLI to fail, right? An example of why you might want that is you have had a warning in production for a while saying to users, hey, this is deprecated, and now you want to take the next step. So you want to reject it in CI/CD so that new things get some kind of rejection, right? There's more teeth to your recommendation to your staff or whatever. But once it's in Kubernetes, it would still be allowed. So you're not yet putting production at risk.
So that's already part of the current design, right? Where we specifically can say that action is deny and enforcement point is getter. And for the others, we can say action is warn and enforcement point is webhook. That essentially replicates the behavior where somebody would get deny message on getter, but on webhook they would get a warning, right?
That's fair. So you don't even need new primitives to get that
Yeah.
behavior. Yeah, I'm convinced with that.
Yeah, so but I was confused because the user specifically asked for failure on warn. I thought that was a specific case, but I guess we can like umbrella it underneath this narrative anyways.
Yeah, I think there's like how users phrase the
Yeah.
ask and what they're trying to achieve with it, right? And it's sometimes it's true that they're like literally, no, I want this. And sometimes it's just I can't do this behavior that I want. And if you could do it in a reasonable way, I'm happy. I
Yeah.
think this is the second.
Okay, cool. I'll post on the issue saying that this is the current implementation we are adopting. If the user is satisfied with it, then we get the approval anyways, right? Okay, cool. Nothing else from my side.
Thank you. Oh, Rita, I see you talking, but I don't hear you.
You need to change the input, I guess.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear that.
Problem having multiple devices. Yeah, I just added the 30 seconds limitation in KK for VAP. I want to make sure everyone is aware of it. Obviously, I'm adding it as a comment in the code. And maybe I'll add an issue to track, but I don't know if do we want to quickly just talk about it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the TLDR here is where do I start? So as you know, VAP in KK has the ability to reference a custom resource for parameters, right? But in order to do that, the Kubernetes API server needs to find that custom resource. And as it turns out, currently there's a 30 seconds it can take up to 30 seconds for API server to discover set new custom resource, right? And we discovered this when running the unit test. And I talked to the folks who was implementing VAP. Sounds like they're aware of it. They're going to document it after 130 is released. And I think they have a plan to fix this at some point, but not anytime soon. So as a result, what this means is obviously by default, this is why we have failure policy set to ignore. And I happen to hit this because I had fail as the failure policy. And we should definitely document this as part of Gatekeeper when people are using it. The net effect, however, is as you're creating constraint templates and constraints, if you have failure policy set to fail, it could actually block all the resources that are going to be created after you create the VAP resource. After constraint template creates the VAP resource, which is not a great experience.
Is there some wiggle room there? Like, because there's match conditions is on the binding for the most part, right? For stuff that we can actually put there. Like if we had match resources, which we don't, right? Because Gatekeeper, like resources don't exist in static config. But if we did, and we matched against pod, and like someone tried to create a namespace, right? So the binding matches against pod. It's missing the CRD, or it's not aware of the CRD for the parameters object, and failure policies fail. So we hit the condition where inbound requests would fail. Will match conditions dominate such that it does the filtering before it looks for the parameters object, and therefore won't fail, even though it's not aware of this custom resource, or will it fail regardless?
From what I can tell, it will just straight up fail. Like it doesn't, I can't tell if it's even like looking at the match conditions. Because
Okay, because
Yeah.
that could be a path forward for ameliorating this, would be if we were able to have multiple targets and VAP was a target, it would be reasonable to have resource at that point as a matcher, right? Like we can't have resource as a matcher for Gator, and we can't have it for audit, because how do you figure out what resource corresponds with a kind? But uh, for admission webhooks, perfectly fine matcher. So
I think again we need to test this, but from what I can tell from the test, it seems like it's just failing on validation. So so again, when the failure policy is fail, it doesn't even matter like what the resource you're trying to create. It doesn't even evaluate that. It just says, hey, this VAP is failing, therefore it's going to block all admission requests.
if that's true, I think you could probably raise it as a higher priority bug in Kubernetes. Because one of the points of match conditions was to limit the blast radius of things. And not just like match conditions, the list of cell statements, but also the literal matchers. Because like, if I'm a cloud provider, right, I don't necessarily want users to be able to write VAP policies that interfere with like system level operations, right? Like,
Understood. I guess like this is more unique to our scenario because I think the VAP people are thinking usually you would have the CRDs created before you create the VAP.
Sorry. I actually don't think that's
I don't think that's true.
always true. Yeah, like if you're creating a net new validating admission policy, right? Like kubectl apply manifest that's just what you do, So
again, this is pretty bad bug. Again, I want to share this with y'all so we all understand the impact here. But I agree. I think this deserves its own like KK issue. And hopefully we can work with the VAP folks to get it resolved sooner rather than later.
Yeah, like what I'm saying is if you want to make it like an issue of concern, ignoring Gatekeeper, I think I can make that case.
For sure. And your proposal is use match condition to somehow do a better job to scope down the impact, right? Because it shouldn't block all resources. That's just silly. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But I guess like the net effect for us at this point is obviously it impacts unit tests, and for whatever reason, and I'm guessing it's because E2E takes some time. We're not hitting this 30 seconds in E2E. But and also because the failure policy is ignored. That's a big one. Sorry. But the net effect is like if you happen to say create a resource that should be failing on validation, within that 30 seconds, it won't block, obviously. So not great.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of fail open at that point.
Yeah.
I definitely think there's a caveat here around, like, if you're transitioning between VAP and not VAP. And this was true even before, but definitely true now. You cannot reason about enforcement during that transition. The other, like, problem is VAPs don't have status, right? So you don't know when a VAP has been fully ingested by the control plane.
Yep.
So even if you weren't using Gatekeeper, right, and you just applied a VAP object, as a user, as far as I'm aware, there's no way to reason
Yep.
about the
Nope.
current state.
I have an issue for that. This is a dangling binding problem, like where there's no VAP. You have a binding. Okay. Very helpful.
Wait, would the binding not cause a failure as well? Because the binding is
The
like
binding doesn't, because it's validation of VAP that is failing.
Oh, that's inconsistent with the binding being the manifestation of intent. Yeah.
If you
Yeah,
have
yeah,
a binding that doesn't have a VAP, it does nothing.
Right. Whereas but if you have a VAP without a binding, it also does nothing.
It
Right.
should not do anything. Yes,
Correct.
agreed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But I think we're kind of saying the same thing in different directions.
Yeah.
A binding on its own is a sign something is wrong.
Right. This is also extra useful for Xander because he's working on the KubeCon demos. So use with care. Just wait 30 seconds. I'm just kidding.
Just insert some patter between the CLI
Well,
steps.
it takes up to 30 seconds. I couldn't believe it. It's like 30 seconds. That's quite long.
I also don't do live demos. I record my terminal so I can trim away.
All right. I live the risky life.
I mean, worst case, you have the audit, I guess. Right?
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
always that.
Well, I mean, that's
Yeah.
okay.
Sorry, that's it. I just want to make sure folks are aware of this. And that that PR is ready to be reviewed. Is ready for the day when this is fixed and upstream.
Yeah.
And thanks
Yeah,
for
I LGTM just now. The artifacts are in from my storage account. I'll keep those like until this is gone. So don't worry
and
about
thanks
them.
for Surtash keep pushing me on this because without it we wouldn't have discovered this 30 seconds. So thanks again.
Yeah, so don't worry about the artifacts. They're just coming from my storage account.
Sure, what could go wrong?
Yeah. Bitcoin mining.
Right. Anything else?
Target handler refresh or not today?
I would love to get the time back for 130 stuff.
Cool. We can do it another week.
Anybody else? Wait. Good to talk to you. Bye.
Bye.